Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nola, and it's Monday the 31st of July. Please excuse my croaky voice. I'm still recovering from quite a bad virus that I've had for a number of weeks now. But today I felt that I could have this podcast session without any undue strain on my voice. Over the last month or so, I've been thinking about what topic was the most pertinent. And if you look back at the earlier podcasts, you'll know that I introduced a new model for peace based on the letters of the word peace. And I've talked a lot about the P aspect, planet and people, and how the interrelationships exist. And it's important that we balance those relationships. Though the E is, I think, one of the most important letters in the word peace. The E after P is about empowerment. Now, when I was studying human rights at graduate level at university, there was a lot of the historical information that I found challenging, mainly because of the inhumanities that had been imposed on people. And if you sit for a moment and just imagine that you're the only person on the face of the earth, you'd have to understand how best to treat yourself by realizing that if you don't treat yourself right, you won't last long. And that's where, if we multiply one human to the current population of the earth, we get the sense that people have lost their understanding of what it's like to be on their own and looking out for their own quality of life and their own purpose, their own protection, their health, their well-being. It's not to say that looking out for yourself is selfish. But when people lose sight of how important it is to protect yourself first, and by so doing you're helping to protect others in a good way, when people lose sight of that, that's when we get the issues of greed and ego and power and control imbalance and selfishness, and all of those things start coming in. When we strip back a human being to the raw inputs to their life that are important for them to survive, it's air that we breathe, water that we have to drink, food that we can eat, relationships, and including the relationship with ourselves, our ability to be loved, whether it's self-love or external love, our ability to give, whether it's giving to the environment or giving to others. We have fundamental needs for survival. And that's, I think, what we need to refocus on and strip back all of that ancillary, selfish, non-humanitarian aspect to humans and our relationships that is what we're experiencing now. Let me explain a little bit more about that. In my studies in human rights, as I said, I found that the historical information that I was using to reference and make decisions and recommendations of what we should do to change things now, that historical information concerned me because it showed patterns. Now, no human being is perfect. We're all flawed in our personalities because spiritually we're not at that pure level. However, people vary in their spiritual maturity and their the way that they manifest that through their personality. Some people are very, spend their life being very much ego focused. Some people have a real duplicity in their thinking, where they can say one thing one day and mean the exact opposite, and then deny saying it the next day. They can work completely opposite to what they've said, with no logical reasoning. And it's the complexity of human nature, our spiritual beings, that is probably our greatest challenge as a humanity, to get some balance back and educate people in whatever way that you can about the importance of thinking of what impact you're going to have on somebody else if you make a certain decision. Human rights, in the empowerment sense, is, empowerment is what human rights is. Empowerment is fundamental to human rights. And when we didn't have individuals and societies operating with even a sense of equality and a sense of reasonableness, human rights wasn't even on the table. And it's not 80 years ago that we had our Universal Declaration of Human Rights agreed by the vast majority of nations. However, what we're still seeing are highly developed, mature, democratic societies completely ignoring the human rights of women, of coloured people, of people who identify with at a certain gender or non-gender, of people of a certain size, people of a certain religious belief. We have these prejudices and biases that are so powerful, they're undermining the human rights that we all possess. We have fundamental rights that we should be allowed to live and experience. Things like the right to find work and have enjoyment in our working life, the right to have a family, the right to express ourselves within legal limits, express our opinions, the right to choose a religion if that's what we want, the right not to choose a religion, the right to form bonds and alliances with people, the right to an education. All of these things, as well as the right of to be kept safe in the country in which you reside. So an individual has an expectation, and nation states have an obligation to keep their people safe. When we think about all of those human rights, underpinning everything is the individual feeling empowered. So what that means is that unless an individual has information, has sufficient confidence and sense of self-esteem, has sufficient wherewithal, whether that comes from a personal energy or whether that comes from a level of education and awareness, a person has a wherewithal to make their life what they want it to be. The empowerment side of it is so important. And if we withhold information, if we denigrate people and don't appreciate what they have to offer, don't acknowledge what they've done, or don't sincerely acknowledge what they've done. Insincerity is probably one of the worst aspects of an ego. When there's insincerity in relationships, you don't have both parties fully empowered. And that's part of our global situation at the moment. Whether or not we ever resolve it as a humanity, I don't know. I don't know whether in 100 years, 200, 500 years' time, if there is a humanity left, whether we will still be in the same situation. I feel that the more information that people have, the more discerning they can be in their decisions, the more that people apply the lessons that they've learned, the more wisdom that they will gain, and that awareness of risk management that they need to have in order to have the right kind of future for themselves. Unless we acknowledge as a humanity that there is an extreme imbalance at present, the future for us as a cohesive and stable and peaceful species, I think, is greatly at risk. And that's one of the fundamental reasons why no matter the naysayers, no matter the pushback that I get, no matter the criticism that I receive, the caustic, almost like a sarcasm from some people of, we'll never have global peace. Ultimately, if every single person can recognise and influence future generations, then eventually we may get to that point where we can live harmoniously together and harmoniously with nature and sustain the planet that is our only home. Empowerment is very personal. I can give you a position of power, but I can't give you your personal power. Only God gives you your personal power. That is a divine gift that we all have, and how you use it is your choice. If you want to use your power and your sense of empowerment in a negative way, knock yourself out. Go and do that. But karmically, the outcomes won't be good for you. If you want to do good with your personal power, knock yourself out again. The karmic outcomes for that will be much better, and you will have achieved a level of spiritual maturity that others will only wish that they could achieve. I can't empower another human being except in the context of inspiring somebody. Self-motivation must come from within. You can push people to motivate them, but self-motivation is the most powerful way for somebody to sustain their effort. Empowerment is about somebody within themselves feeling confident, knowledgeable, having knowledge of their personal power and how to use it, knowing how best to channel that sense of empowerment. But also the other side of it is they have to know what's missing. They have to know what they're looking for. They have to know what they need and what they want. This is a topic that I will explore in more detail, but I wanted to highlight in my second book, I have a number of, and as in my first book, No Boxing Allowed, I have a number of sections that I highlight, in bold and have them freely visible to people so they can go back and reflect. And there's obviously, the background to that is articulated. In my second book, which was the one I was going to write first, that's titled From Pre-Menstrual Syndrome to Positive Mental Attitude, the focus is on the positive mental attitude, but it's about helping women to recognise, and men to recognise, the toxicity of relationships, the power and control struggles that exist, and it helps people to change if they want to change. I talk a lot in this book about the signs and symptoms of abusive and controlling relationships. But ultimately, when an individual makes a choice to journey to a better place, they have to know this point, which is don't suffer it, change it. The don't suffer it, change it comes from what happened when we had the Irish Republican Army fighting with the UK, with England, and the war that resulted in so much bloodshed, so much heartache, so much misunderstanding. It was at the point when the parties that had the power and felt empowered to make change actually said, you know, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're going to change it. Over the last few weeks, as I've been recovering from my virus, I have had the opportunity to reflect a lot on my own past and my current future, and my future, my currency and my future. And you won't ever get to a point in life where you think, yeah, it's all perfect, don't have to do anything from now on. Because we're always changing. Every human being wakes up another day, and it's a new opportunity to make the most of that life on earth. So when it's our time not to be around anymore, that's when, from a spiritual perspective, we have probably grown to the extent that we're going to grow. And in this lifetime, we will have given and received what was available to us and what we allowed to have happen, and what other people were willing to give to us as well. Each life is different. Each person is empowered to live their life the way they want. I consistently advocate for people to use their personal power when they may not have a position in which they can be powerful. I advocate for people to use their personal power for goodness only. And it is through that expression of integrity and honesty and calmness and compassion that we will have a fighting chance as a humanity to achieve global peace. The peace that comes from the individual when they stop pushing, when they stop wanting to control other people, when they want to stop manipulating situations for their own selfish outcomes. When we have that happen, when people actually recognise that what they're doing is wrong and it's toxic and it's bad and it's damaging, that's when we can have the pivot of change to a more permanent state of inner peace. And when that person reaches that stage of inner peace, and as it fluctuates and rolls on through life, that's when the empowerment really starts to double up and double up. So when you're empowered as a youngster, you'll have periods where you have setbacks. You feel empowered again, you have more setbacks. But the more that you feel empowered, the more you expand on that empowerment through developing resilience, through making hard decisions when they're necessary. The more that you do that, the more empowered you will be. So hopefully, by the time you have, reached that end of life stage, you won't need to be working so hard to understand yourself, receive what you deserve, and you won't need to forgive quite as much, I think, is probably the best way I can put it. I trust you all have a lovely week this week. I will be back as soon as I can. I'm going to give my throat a little bit more rest. When I come back again, I want to talk more about empowerment and in the context of human rights, and look at some of the things that we're experiencing, seeing happening around the world today. I have some deep concerns that humanity and those that are in positions of power are not doing us any favours. And for the vast majority of us, we need to start being loud and constant and consistent in our objection. Otherwise, the bad karma people are actually going to be more empowered than they were before or are currently. Have a great rest of week. Bye for now, folks.